Hi there, my name is Marley and I hope you are doing well. Today I'm going to be filming my September wrap up. It is now officially fall and it is very gloomy out today, so very fitting. I ended up successfully reading 8 books. I showed 10 fingers, 8 books this month and I feel pretty good about it. Unfortunately, I did film a reading vlog with a certain theme to it this month that led to a lot of lower rated books, but all of the rest of the books besides those were all very good and very enjoyable. So let's dive into them. As always, I'm going to start out talking about the books that I enjoyed the least leading up to my favorite books of the month. So as I said, first of all, I filmed a reading vlog where I read books that came out the year that I was born, which was 1996, which was 25 years ago. So as you can imagine, all of these books were a little bit outdated and just not the best. So first off, we have That Summer by Sarah Dessen. Yes, the queen, Sarah Dessen. She has wrote a lot of probably our favorite contemporary YA books. Unfortunately, her very first book that she published, which was titled That Summer, was not her best. This book follows Haven, who I think is 15 years old, and it's just sort of following her experience during this one summer as she is going through a lot with her dad getting remarried, her sister getting married, and her growing at a rapid rate where she feels like she is, you know, standing out a lot and is just too tall, and then just reflecting on a past summer where she had a really good time with her family and just sort of reminiscing on childhood basically. But as you can see, it's a very thin book and not very much happens in this book, so I really did not enjoy it very much and gave it 2.5 stars just because I do think what was in the book was pretty good. I think that Haven had very real emotions that really did reflect the teenage experience. I really like the sisterly relationship in this book, but unfortunately there just was not enough going on, not enough of a story to really be that good. So this was my least favorite book of the month. Oh, sorry, I give it 2 stars, not 2.5. The next one I did give 2.5, and that was Moonlight Becomes You by Mary Higgins Clark. She's a pretty popular thriller author as far as I know, and this book was a mystery thriller. Sorry, I use the words mystery and thriller interchangeably sometimes when they probably shouldn't. This was both though. So this is following a main character. I think her name was Maggie. She's like a 30-year-old woman and a pretty successful photographer, and she ends up reconnecting with this woman who was her stepmother for a few years when she was younger, and they really bonded during that time. But since her father and that woman split up, she hasn't really seen her. But she reconnects with her and then is planning to go visit her ex-stepmother, and then finds out that she's been murdered in her own home. And then when they read the will, they see that she has left all of her inheritance to Maggie, and then it's just sort of a mystery of who killed the stepmother and why. Does it have something to do with her house that she was thinking about selling? And then of course, is Maggie now a target as well, that she is inheriting the house? So this is a pretty typical thriller, and I saw the twist coming from kind of a mile away. I think it was actually my first guess was who the killer was, and I think that's just because it is such an old mystery that we've seen so many different twists happen at this point that it was pretty predictable. I also found that the point of views were just too much in this story. Like every single character had a point of view and the chapters would be very short, so that it was hard to even learn that much about the character before I was bouncing to another point of view. Yeah, just really not my cup of tea, but I'm sure for the time it was great, but reading it now, it's just not anything special. And the last book I read for that vlog, which was the best one and I gave 3 stars to, was Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding, which I'm sure many people have heard of this book. So this follows a British woman named Bridget Jones, obviously, and it is written like it is her diary, as in, you know, she's writing each entry like a diary entry, the date, the time, stuff like that. And it's a quite comical style. If you've read The Confessions of Georgia Nicholson, which is like a teenage version, it's a very similar style to that, and it has that typical British quirky, weird humor to it. Bridget is working in publishing at the beginning of the book, but she's not really passionate about that. She ends up having a career change. She also is getting pressured by her family to find a boyfriend, as I think she's like 30 at this point. So she is dating and hooking up with this guy at work, and then there's this other guy, you know, a bit of a love triangle thing. Not as much as the movie though. I think they make that more into a love triangle, but yeah, there's romance and then there's a lot just focusing on Bridget's day-to-day life. I didn't enjoy this that much because of the outdatedness of it. As I mentioned, quite a few things were not really acceptable anymore. One of the things would be such a focus on Bridget's weight. That is a relatable thing a lot of women or people in general go through, feeling, you know, uncomfortable with their weight. But just the amount that she focused on it, and the fact that people would say she's fat, or she would say she's fat, and it would list her weight. And I was reading a review on Goodreads, and someone who was heavier than her read this and was like, oh, so I'm fat then. Like, Bridget's calling herself fat at this weight, but I'm even heavier than her. Obviously that is going to be upsetting to read. Just the fact that she was focusing on it so much, I think would be probably triggering for people who actually have an eating disorder, and it could trigger those like obsessive thoughts. So don't read it if you struggle with that. But of course, like, it's a very popular book for a reason. It was super funny. Another thing that disappointed me though was the romantic aspect with Mr. Darcy, Mark Darcy. It was very much a side story, and I wish we had focused on that relationship more and focused on the romance more. So yeah, if you want to see more of my thoughts like in the moment, check out that vlog that I did, but definitely don't recommend any of those 3 books. Moving on to some better books. I read Riley Sager's newest book, Survive the Night, finally, after talking about it so much and saying how excited I was, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So I was kind of saying how like this has very controversial opinions. Some people love it and some people are really disappointed by it and hate it. I'm sort of in between. Unsurprisingly, Libra, trying to be fair and see both sides and everything. Okay, if you don't know, this is what is the main character named? This is following Charlie, and she is in college, and her best friend has recently been murdered, and they have not caught the killer yet, and so she's really struggling mentally with this, as you can imagine. She also suffers from these visions or like delusions. I am assuming she is schizophrenic, but they never really say that. She just has these pictures in her head that she'll sometimes see, so she's struggling with that as well. So she ends up really wanting to leave the college. She's desperate for a ride, so she takes a ride with this stranger named Josh, this random man that she really does not know. You know, her boyfriend's kind of scared for her. She's a little scared, but she's like, I need to get out of here. So she gets in the car with him, and they're getting along at first, and then some suspicious things start happening. She starts to believe that Josh is the killer that's on the loose, the serial killer that killed her best friend. And now she's stuck in the car with him, and it is in the 90s, so she does not have a cell phone or anything like that. So it's her basically just trying to survive the night. And because she is an unreliable narrator, she doesn't know if she can really trust herself, or if she's just having these illusions that are making her see suspicious things, or if he actually is suspicious. And then of course you as a reader are trying to figure that out as well. A lot of the twists were predictable. I want to say that I did guess pretty much every one of the twists, and I'm not like trying to flex on that. Like, I honestly feel like a lot of people would, and I think that's why a lot of people were disappointed. However, I just really am a big fan of Riley Sager's writing. Like, I still was just so engrossed in this book and just wanted to keep reading. So because of that, I still had to rate it pretty high. Like, even if I did expect certain things that happened, it was still really enjoyable. It could have been worse. Like, partway through, I was like, if this doesn't have another twist, I'm gonna be pissed. But then it did. So yeah, I definitely was a bit disappointed, just considering I liked Home Before Dark a lot more. But it is what it is. I still enjoyed it. If you want like a fast-paced thriller that, you know, happens all in one night, unreliable narrator, if you like those sort of tropes, then I still would recommend it. But yeah, lower your expectations a little bit for sure. Another thriller I read and gave 4 stars to is Someone We Know by Shari Lapena. This is the first Shari Lapena book I've ever read, and I actually found out she lives in Toronto, so that's cool. That's where I also live. So in this one, we're following quite a few characters. To start, we're following following this one family, and they have a teenage son that they find out has recently been breaking into people's homes, not really stealing anything, but hacking onto their computers and looking at some of their information on there. So the parents are pretty disturbed to learn about that, and you know, end up punishing their son. And then the mom is also super guilty and ends up writing some anonymous apology notes to some of her neighbors, which ends up not being the best idea. In the meantime, there is this other couple, and the woman has been missing for a while, and then they find her dead body. So then it becomes a murder mystery of who killed her. And of course, one of the houses that that kid broke into was the house of that couple with the murdered woman. So you can imagine this gets all entangled. You're also seeing some of the other families that are in that neighborhood as well, as it's one of those neighborhoods where like all the characters are constantly talking and gossiping. So we're finding out stuff because of that, but also there's obviously the police investigation going on as well. This is pretty good. I did again end up guessing the killer, guessing the twist. There was a little bit more to it than I was expecting, but it definitely was not super unpredictable, so I will warn about that. But it still is one of those things where like the journey was still super fun, very fast paced again. Definitely gives you a lot of different suspects to consider as you go. It's just sort of a good domestic thriller if that is the type of thriller that you want. And I quite liked Shari Lapena's writing, so I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of her books, such as her newest one that just came out. I forget what it's called, but yeah, I would recommend this if you want like a pretty quick, fun thriller. Then these last couple books were also featured in a vlog I did where I read books that TikTok recommended to me. That was really, really fun. So a book that I gave 4.5 stars to was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I finally read this one and it was super, super cute. It did not disappoint. I think I also gave Beach Read by Emily Henry 4.5 stars last year, so just as good, maybe better. It's definitely a little bit more lighthearted, but it follows Poppy and Alex, and they meet in college and they become friends and start going on these little trips every summer until one summer they get in some sort of fight or for some reason stop talking, and then a few years pass and then Poppy reaches out to have kind of like one last trip because she misses him, and they start to reconnect and everything. So we are seeing that current day trip, and then we're also seeing flashbacks to all of their previous trips and getting sort of that background to their relationship leading up to seeing why they ultimately decided to stop talking. As you can tell, this is a friendship to lovers romance, which I really, really like, and I think this one is unique in that because you're not just seeing the present day status of the relationship, you are still getting to see those flashbacks. So I think a criticism people have of friendship to romance is that you don't see the foundation of the relationship, but you actually do get to see it in this book through the flashbacks. So that just made it such a perfect book for me because you're seeing so many fun moments and then also so much angst and tension. Like they really just give you all that you want. Like there's a like close proximity and that there's only one bed, or you know, just seeing like the jealousy that they have for each other as they date different people throughout the years. It really reminded me of the book Love Rosie, which also was adapted to a movie with Lily Collins and Sam Claflin, if you've seen that, where it's just this romance that takes place over so many years because things just keep popping up that keep them apart. In this one, a main thing is that they don't want to ruin their friendship and the fact that they are just such opposites that they don't think that it's going to work. So I really recommend this to everyone, especially if you're not that big on like smut heavy romances like I am. This is one that like has a little bit of spice in it, but mostly it's just focused on the relationship, and I really love that. It really is focused on the relationship. Like every scene is between Alex and Poppy. You don't really have to deal with any like side stories, so that's really good and highly recommend. Then I also read An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and I give this one 4.5 stars out of 5. This is a dystopian slash fantasy YA novel I'm sure you've heard of. It's very popular. We are following two different characters in this dystopian world. One of them is Laya. She's like a 16 or 17-year-old girl. She's like one of the outcasts in this society, I would say, and then her brother ends up getting them in trouble and getting kidnapped. So she gets involved with the resistance and they put her on this mission to infiltrate the, now I'm forgetting all the terminology of this world, the empire, the military of the empire. She has to infiltrate, and then it will help her get her brother back if she does these tasks for them. Then we are also following Elias, who is one of those military getting trained, and he does not believe in the empire. Like, he wants to escape that world, just showing how he's actually a hero, not the villain. It's just him having to deal with not agreeing with this, but being forced to go through these trials to be in the military. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but it's just one of those typical dystopian stories where there's this corrupted society and we have our heroes that are trying to survive and save the day. And I absolutely loved it. It definitely was darker, like it's pretty dark, and most dystopians are though, I guess. There was a lot of talk of like sexual violence against women, and that got to be a little bit too much for me. I wish it didn't kind of focus on that so much or bring it up so casually, but other than that, like, this was action-packed, super interesting from the start to the finish. Really liked the main characters. I had ships in it. I had multiple ships in this series that I'm very interested to see which ones flourish and which ones don't. Yeah, definitely recommend to everyone that reads this genre. It's definitely a must read. It's really good. And then the last book, and probably my favorite book that I read this month, was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I gave this 4.5 stars out of 5, although a part of me is like, should I have given it 5? I don't know, but this is a YA mystery that, again, I'm sure you've heard of. It is a series, and I think it's being made into a movie or something too. The premise is very similar to Knives Out. We have our main character named Avery, and she has a very like sucky life. Like, her mom has died, her dad is out of the picture. She's living with her half-sister. She's poor and just like trying to do what she can to get the best grades, to get scholarships for school, blah, blah, blah. She ends up finding out that this inheritance was left to her by this very rich man, Mr. Hawthorne. And yeah, he leaves her his whole inheritance, like does not leave it to his family. He leaves it to her. And she has no idea who this man is or why he would leave all of this money to her. Like, I'm talking billions of dollars. And so obviously the family is like pissed and wants to know why he would have left it to her. They are suspicious. She ends up, you know, living at the Hawthorne mansion with them and kind of gets wrapped up in these games, as Mr. Hawthorne was very much into playing these little games with his grandsons and doing these little riddles. So he has 4 grandsons, 2 of which end up being love interests for Avery, which I loved, and all of them are just kind of trying to solve the riddle and figure out why she has been involved in this. Highly recommend if you are into YA mystery thrillers, which I really am. This might become one of my favorites as it is a series, so it probably will be like Truly Devious or A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. As I will say, the mystery definitely is left off on a cliffhanger. We definitely are going to find out more throughout the series, and in the moment finishing it, I was a little bit disappointed with that, as you know, you're just kind of expecting to find out everything at the end of the book, and then you don't. You do get some reveals, obviously, which I appreciated, but that is why I initially took off the 0.5, because I was a little bit disappointed with that. But otherwise, it was super good, super entertaining. As I said, I liked the love interest elements as well as the mystery throughout, and I'm just so excited to continue this series, and I just really highly recommend this. So as you can see, I had quite a few great books this month and a few not so great. Overall, pretty good. So let me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts are. Please make sure to follow me on my other accounts like Goodread, Instagram, TikTok, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!